Donald Trump's latest trade and foreign policy moves are sending shockwaves across U.S. alliances, and Canada finds itself right at the center of the storm. One of the biggest questions facing Ottawa today is whether to move forward with its massive contract for American-built F-35 fighter jets or to rethink the deal entirely. For years, the F-35 has been described as the backbone of the future Royal Canadian Air Force. But Trump's actions on tariffs, trade, and NATO pressure have made Canadian leaders reconsider whether tying their defense futures so tightly to Washington is the right move. Canada formally committed in early 2023 to buy 88 F-35 Lightning II jets and a contract worth nearly 19 billion Canadian dollars, about 13 billion US dollars. The first batch of jets was scheduled for delivery in 2026, with the rest arriving in stages until the early 2030s. The F-35 program, led by Lockheed Martin, promised Canada cutting-edge stealth technology, NATO interoperability, and access to a vast global supply chain. It was framed as an investment in Canada's national security and international credibility. But while the deal looked solid on paper, Trump's return to power and his America First policies have changed the landscape. Trump has always been skeptical of America's NATO allies, and Canada has been one of his frequent targets. He has repeatedly criticized Ottawa for failing to meet NATO's 2% of GDP defense spending target. Canada's defense budget currently sits closer to 1.4%, even with recent increases. Trump has hinted that countries not meeting the spending threshold should not be guaranteed U.S. protection, a statement that rattled allies across Europe and North America. For Canada, which shares the world's longest undefended border with the United States and depends heavily on U.S. military cooperation, Trump's rhetoric raises alarm bells. At the same time, Trump's economic policies are directly straining U.S.-Canada relations. New tariffs on Canadian goods, from lumber to agriculture, have sparked disputes in trade talks. Ottawa has responded with countermeasures, fueling uncertainty across the bilateral relationship. In this environment, Canadian officials worry about the risk of being locked into a $19 billion defense contract that leaves them dependent on U.S. supply chains and U.S. political goodwill. If Trump were to use access to spare parts or software upgrades as leverage in a trade dispute, Canada could find its Air Force compromised. That concern has led Ottawa to initiate a review of the F-35 deal. Officials insist the review is not an outright cancellation, but the timing sends a clear message. Canada is questioning the long-term security of relying on American-built fighter jets under Trump's leadership. Alternative options are back on the table. Boeing's F/A-18 Super Hornet, although older in design, offers a cheaper solution and could still serve Canada's air defense needs. Sweden's Saab Gripen has gained attention for offering local assembly and maintenance, potentially creating Canadian jobs and providing more independence from U.S. supply chains. These alternatives are not new, they were part of the original competition before Ottawa selected the F-35, but in the current climate, they seem more attractive than before. This isn't the first time Canadian politics have tangled with the F-35 program. Under former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, Canada first joined the U.S.-led development of the jet back in 2010. But as costs soared and delays piled up, the deal became controversial. Harper's successors slowed down the commitment, with Justin Trudeau even promising during his 2015 campaign to scrap the F-35 purchase altogether. Trudeau argued at the time that Canada didn't need a stealth fighter designed for offensive missions. However, years of analysis, NATO pressure, and industry lobbying eventually pulled Canada back into the program, and in 2023 Trudeau's government finalized the purchase. That history of political back and forth makes today's review under Prime Minister Mark Carney even more significant. It's not the first time Ottawa has doubted the F-35, but it's the first time the doubts are directly tied to Trump's policies. For Washington, Canada's wavering is a troubling sign. The F-35 program isn't just about aircraft, it's a cornerstone of U.S. defense strategy and a symbol of Allied unity. If Canada, a close U.S. partner and NATO member, starts exploring alternatives, it could embolden other countries to reconsider their reliance on U.S. defense equipment. Analysts point out that Trump's confrontational style has already pushed European allies like Germany and France to invest more heavily in their own defense industries. If Canada were to follow suit, it would underscore the broader theme of allies seeking independence from Washington's unpredictable leadership. Trump himself has not directly commented on Canada's review, and there is no official record of him raging or the Pentagon being in shock, despite exaggerated claims online. But behind closed doors, U.S. defense officials are watching closely. Billions of dollars are at stake for Lockheed Martin and its suppliers. Canadian aerospace companies that join the F-35 supply chain also have contracts worth hundreds of millions, meaning a withdrawal could hit Canada's own industry as well. Still, the fact that Canada is even signaling uncertainty shows how much Trump's approach has unsettled traditional defense arrangements. Public opinion in Canada reflects this unease. Polling shows most Canadians do not trust Trump's handling of international relations, and skepticism toward the F-35 remains high. Critics argue the jet is too expensive, too complex, and overkill for Canada's defense needs, which primarily focus on Arctic patrol and sovereignty missions rather than global strike capabilities. Supporters counter that Canada must keep up with NATO allies technologically, and stepping away from the F-35 would isolate the country within the alliance. This divide makes the issue as much about politics as defense planning. The coming months will be decisive. If Ottawa continues its review and starts formal discussions with alternative suppliers, Washington may interpret it as a direct rebuke of Trump's leadership. If the review ultimately reaffirms the F-35 purchase, it may be seen as a reluctant choice to maintain NATO alignment despite growing distrust. Either way, the review is already serving as leverage, giving Canada a stronger hand in negotiations with both Washington and defense contractors. In the end, Canada has not cancelled its F-35 deal, but Trump's moves have undeniably shaken confidence in the arrangement. The fact that such a major contract is even under review highlights how closely Canadian security decisions are tied to U.S. politics. As long as Trump continues to pressure allies on trade and defense spending, Canada will face the question at the heart of this story: should it double down on reliance on the United States, or carve out greater independence in its defense policy? That question, more than the jets themselves, is what will shape the future of Canada's military and its relationship with Washington.